of from the garage to the kitchen. So let's take a look at some kitchen things. We're going to look at Frederick Reed, and he was the designer for Fiestaware. So the reason why there is so little original work being done is that there is little serious attempt to do so. These are the words of Frederick Reed. A confession of inability to design is a confession of lack of individuality. Amateurs who do not see this will admit the former and at the same time be very shy about accepting the latter. So while knowledge of the principles of design have to be acquired, the making of a design is more a matter of instinct than anything else. Some people possess this instinct more than others, but even so, the persons thought to be possessed of the least individuality will express themselves in a manner peculiar to themselves, that is, that they are not affected by the conventions of every day. So depend upon others for inspiration, instead of cultivating or developing the design instinct, is to court a sure death for originality. Another thing is sympathy with a method or process of decoration is a great factor in suggesting or giving inspiration for original work. Seeing possibilities of the material is the first step toward materializing these possibilities. And so here again, we have that idea of understanding the material that you're working with in order to be fully creative. Here we have some of the one of the designs of Frederick Reed, which is still available today. Fiestaware became extremely popular. You can tell sort of the year by the back stamps. There's lots of different ones. There's tons of books about this stuff. In particular, collect them. Last year I had a display in the art gallery hallway of all the different types of Fiestaware that you could find. And of course, people collected them because they love the colors. They had a sort of feel of handmade look. Here's more about the cast indents and the backing of the different types. And what Fiesta would do is that once, they would have a color for a certain period of time, and then they would retire that color. And then, of course, then you couldn't get it unless you had bought it earlier. And so then it would become sought after. I have little tiny bowls and all kinds of things that are literally worth, like a lot of money, just even though they're very small, just because of the age. So this was going from like the mid 1930s up until today. Another designer during this time is Russell White. He was born in 1904, dies in 1976. He was again an American industrial designer during the 20th century. Beginning in the late 1920s through the 1960s, Russell White created a succession of artistically distinctive and commercially successful items that were brought to the world through the public. He had this method of very fluid design. He believed that the table should be the center of the home. So remember when we talked about arts and crafts, how we saw William Morris saying the garden and then moving into the kitchen and the table, that those were the centers of the home. And here we see that happening again. Designing in layers from the outwards in. He designed tableware to larger furniture, architecture, landscaping, all according to his concepts of what he called easy and informal living. So he kind of wanted to dress it down. It was through his immensely popular and widely distributed housewares and furnishings that he sort of revolutionized the ways that Americans lived. I mean, kind of the idea of outdoor living became part of his, thoughts. So Russell White Studios remains active in industrial design licensing. He's got studios in Garrison, in New York, Burbank, California, and so on. And there's still design going on. He's best known for his colorful American modern, the widely sold American ceramic dinnerware, and it was one of the most widely sold in history between 1939 and 1959. And this was done in Steubenville pottery in Steubenville, Ohio. He also designed top-selling wooden furniture, spun aluminum, other kinds of accessories, and simple practical lifestyle. He basically tried to get everyday Americans to embrace modernism in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. His trademark signature was like soft, fluid, kind of spaceship-like lines. And he would, put his own name on things, which basically now we see all over the place. Examples would be like Ralph Lauren, Martha Stewart, lots of others, Rachel Ray. And of course, his most popular design, he had many popular lines, but his most popular was melamine. And here we have the Melmac melamine resin plastic dinnerware. So it's the first time we see something like this. He did early research on plastic Melmac dinnerware for restaurant use, and then he created a line that could be used in the home, and he called it residential. It was manufactured by Northern Plastic Company of Boston, and it started being manufactured in 1953. So definitely mid-century modern. Also, residential was one of the most popular Melmac lines, which grossed over $4 million in 1957. So you can just imagine what today's dollars would be like. And again, remember I said he did spun aluminum, and here we have some of his spun aluminum. I actually have a couple of his pieces too. And there's another punch set. So you'd have punch in the middle and everybody had their cup. Here's a tea set. Another really important designer is Brooks Stevens. He is one of our own. He was born on June 7th in 1911 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was an industrial designer, and he was known for an array of innovations that spanned over 60 years. I had the great good fortune to have worked with him when I was a teacher at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. And I also interviewed him for a special that we did on Milwaukee Public Television some time ago. And he's an incredible person. He was stricken with polio as a child. His father encouraged him to draw while he was bedridden. And he later attended Cornell University in New York from 1929 to 1933. For a brief time, he worked for a firm as a package designer, and then he opened up his own design firm in 1934. His sphere of influence spread quickly until 1952, when estimated retail sale of all the products that were designed by him had reached over $1 billion. I'm just going to go through here's some of his designs. He was one of the last of generations of what we call product design pioneers, whose creations paved the way for everyday gadgetry that people saw and kind of took for granted. Mr. Stevens continued to teach industrial design at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design until his death in 1995. So in 1955, this is a car that he designed. It was called the Die Valkyrie. This was a prototype concept dream car. It was designed not only to be a showcase car, but in the U.S., also it was a prize winner at various shows throughout the world. It not only won at the Paris Auto Show, but also took major trophies at the U.S. Auto Show in Madison Square Garden. Brooks called the car the Die Valkyrie because Brunhild and the other mythical sisters of the wind, immortalized in the Wagnerian opera, they could fly anywhere. So he wanted this car to feel like it literally had wings. So he began the process of the Die Valkyrie with a 125-inch wheelbase chassis and a 331 cubic inch V8 engine of a contemporary Cadillac series, which was called the 62. Leaving both pretty much alone, he replaced the stock body with a striking 4-seat steel convertible shell, bearing rakish long hoods, short deck proportions, and both a solid removable roof panel and a skimpy rag top. So this was what we called a hard roof and a soft roof. The last Stevens recalled was only for getting you home if it started to rain. So he didn't really care about the rag top. The Die Valkyrie's most radical aspect by far was its huge, sharply V'd front end or bumper grille. So it was deliberately chosen to emphasize what was under the hood. In other words, this has really got power. That was the idea. And there he had the 8 with the V. So literally meaning, for the Die Valkyrie, but also for the V8. One wag that talked about it termed it the snowplow. And Stevens thought that was pretty funny. But at least it was different. Small parking lamps were set into the V's wide outriggers. So see how they have the V is also repeated in the bumper and then in the grille, and then it kind of comes right over the top of the lights. And notice the little slits in there. So then that would all just unscrew off when you change the headlamp. it sort of bisected the headlamps before wrapping around to continue all the way around into the side moldings. So there you can see how it comes all the way around into the side moldings. Several elements make Die Valkyrie look a lot newer now than it actually is. Recessed cowled headlamps, a flat hood nearly level with the front fenders, a forecast big 3 styling, that happens about 3 to 4 years later. So this idea of like the big, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler had their, wide cars, and that's kind of what this foreshadowed. Cadillac itself would adopt the taillights, much like the Die Valkyrie's compact vertically V'd units. This was also Stevens' first use of the Washington coach door, with its distinctive upward sweep that not only concealed the long door openings. So see how like it kind of came around that kind of curve, and then the two-tone. He also, had a hobby of designing cars, and eventually grew into what he called, what became the Brooks Stevens Automobile Collection and Museum, which was in Mequon, right near Concordia University. It closed its doors, unfortunately, in 1999. In addition to racing his cars against other vintage cars, Stevens began to formulate a concept car that would combine the safety and dependability of all the standard car components, but it would look like a nostalgia of yesterday. And of course, this definitely looks like the SSK. He dreamed up the car known as the Excalibur, a revival of an earlier grand touring car for Studebaker. When that car company went out of business, he and his sons took over the Excalibur production and formed their own corporation for SS Automobiles Incorporated in 1964. There was never a replica car maker until Excalibur, and it lasted for 24 years. Brooks' true passion was classic automobiles, but through his early career as an industrial designer and later as an automobile designer for such companies as American Motors, Volkswagen, Alfa Romeo, Studebaker, Stevens began a modest hobby of collecting classic cars. And here's one of those cars. He also designed this, which I think you may have all heard about, and it's the Wienermobile for Oscar Mayer. He designed the Thing. And he also designed this, the AMX, which was one of the best muscle race cars out there and won many, many awards. And here's another version of that AMX with its top roof, so it could show off the what was under the hood. And there it is in color. And that will take us to the end of the exhibition of From the Garage to the Kitchen.